戦いという言葉の定義を今からお前たちに教え込んでやろう。
Hey folks, this is Picohan on the North American server, and this is a classic. This is the Tier 6 Japanese battleship, the Fuso. The map is north. It is somewhat surprisingly standard battle, and a shout out to Camo68 in the Perth, who is helping me grind Indianapolis missions for the Indianapolis Marathon. The Fuso is one of the very first ships in the game, and for whatever reason, it has become my most played ship by quite a number of fights. Now, unlike some other very early ships, the Fuso has aged pretty well and hasn't been power crept nearly as badly as, say, the Omaha or the New York. Having played a lot of games in this ship, I would say that what I like about the Fuso is that it's been very consistent for me. It hasn't necessarily been a stellar performer all the time, but I haven't really had any really bad games. This is kind of like what I said about the New Orleans, and I really appreciate ships like that. You'll notice I shot HE at the Colorado there. The HE is, I think, one of the tools that helps the consistency of the Fuso. It's not necessarily that good on its own, but you do have 12 shells, and when the Fuso gets up-tiered and the low caliber AP isn't being effective, the HE can be a valid alternative. Although, for the Colorado, at this range, AP or HE both probably would have been fine. While I'm taking pot shots at the Colorado, I'm trying to get into cover near the central island so we can better control who we want to engage. I did take a conservative route around that island between my spawn and the large island due to the Fuso's massive detection range. The Fuso is seen from space, and if the enemy was heavy on this side and you're spotted trying to turn in front of that island, that's super sketchy. What's also super sketchy is this shores that was reversing over there. We got a citadel with an earlier pot shot, and now we're going to predict that he keeps turning and unload a full salvo. That was low caliber AP at a pretty far range, but since we have 12 shells and the shores has no armor, that was a pretty good depth strike and a really nice way to start this game. I did have 2 fires, but I held Damacon until the shores was dead. This early in the game, I generally prefer to be aggressive about letting fires burn because I still have a lot of health and a lot of heals. Approaching this corner, I see the Mayhan and the Mogami on the other side, and of course what I want to do is turn hard right and be angled before I crest the edge of the island such that I can shoot at them and they can't torp me. The Mayhan drops off, and as I get closer, I'm gonna pop the spotter plane and try to get vision here. The Fuso has pretty good range. A lot of the times when I use the spotter plane, it's not to gain more range, it's either to look over an island or to try to get vision on something like this Mayhem. I do think it is the spotter plane that's spotting him. The Mayhem did not appear to have last stand, so we hit him pretty hard. I did glance at the Colorado to see if he had line of sight. The position is a little bit sketchy, but I felt it was important to try to finish this destroyer. And this is an easy shot to finish him off. With the Mayhem dead, and you saw the Torps passed, I'm turning in hard left in order to deal with the now dead Mogami, but also the Colorado, who is presumably going to cut in from the north. If I were doing this in a one-on-one situation, I would probably be trying to turn around and get into a kiting position, but since there's 4 of us here versus 1 of him, there's no reason not to be aggressive. I was caught a little bit off guard by those Mogami Torps, although I should have remembered that they were 10 and he was like 9 away maybe. But luckily they're all going to pass behind. You saw I aimed fairly high on the Colorado. I don't think the Fuso's 356mm shells can penetrate the belt of the Colorado, even at this range, so I decided to play it safe and aim higher. For a lot of low caliber or low penetration ships, I prefer to play it safe and aim higher, and for inaccurate things like the Scharnhorst, that also prevents some shells from going into the water. The Colorado was zigzagging a bit, but instead of angling, he ended up going broadside multiple times, and we got 2 pretty good salvos on him. What the Colorado should have done was immediately turn all the way around and start kiting. He would have mitigated a ton of damage that way. As you can see, as soon as he angles, we're not doing that much damage. One thing to note here, of course, while we're turning to chase the Colorado now, is that a ton of battleships with bigger guns now can overmatch the bow of the Fuso. So had he been focusing on us, it's something we would have to watch for. We would need to try to bait him to hit the belt rather than the nose. HE might also have been a valid choice for that last salvo, but I wasn't being that diligent with the ammo switching. The Fuso does have a quote-unquote fast reload of 28 seconds, and with AR really going, it can get down into the low 20s, which is pretty noticeable. The Kajamada just TK'd the Bayern there. I'm guessing those Torps were for the Colorado, but we have a pretty solid lead at this point. Heading toward the cap, the destroyer in the smoke is a one-shot, so I'm not really worried about him. I'm gonna look at the guys who are at the edge of our range. Unlike the Myogi or the Congo, which have long range that you can't really make use of, the Fuso's is more usable because you have all 12 barrels. For broadside targets, the AP will do pretty good superstructure and such damage, while for angled targets, the HE has a decent chance of setting fires, all things considered. Of course, that's when you actually hit stuff. For erratically moving targets like that Normandy, it can still be really hard to hit. It's not that the shells have a really slow travel time like the North Carolina. It's just that these guys are so far away, and there's so much time for them to move differently than you might have predicted. But we don't want to shoot at the Normandy because the Edinburgh giving broadside is a much better target, and we got a citadel with the front guns, but only 6,000 with the back guns. I think he started slowing to smoke, but we'll wait for the perfect opportunity, which is when he's about to stop, and try to blap him. Edinburgh drops off, but the shells landed true, and we got another citadel for the kill. I put the rest of that gun cooldown at the Normandy, but since he's still maneuvering, it's all going to miss. Started turning out because I know there's destroyers at the south of the cap based on the minimap. Popped the spotter because I wanted to better see what the Normandy was trying to do. He's definitely in range, so we don't need that. But a wild destroyer shows up. Torps show up. So I'm trying to juggle dodging the torps and looking at the destroyer. But we collect the guns just as he starts going broadside. In some ways, it's smarter for a destroyer to go broadside to a battleship so you won't eat full pens, but in that case, we only needed 4 overpens to kill him anyway. The other destroyer turns out to be on the other side, so we're going to angle toward him in case of any torps. Since he's the last guy, it doesn't really matter if we eat a couple torps trying to close the distance. There's no way we can get into a crossfire either. Get an overpen with the front guns, and I see the torps going toward camo, so I turn the ship to bring the rest of the guns on target, and it's a pretty decent salvo again. The fast cooldown means that the front turrets are almost reloaded again, and just trying to see if we can secure the 5th kill. Look at the 2 shells that dispersed perfectly into that guy. So 5 kills on 100,000 damage. That's not that impressive stat-wise, but I thought this was a well-played game. We went to our flank, picked off some ships, and then pressed the advantage all the way to the cap, and we actually carried the tier 8 game by a pretty good margin thanks to having done a lot of destroyer damage as part of that 100,000. Despite what I said about the AG, we didn't really get a chance to show it off. Basically all of the damage was AP. For like the Congo and the Fuso, I would like to do proper reviews at some point, but for now, this is it. So thanks for watching and have a nice day.